Steve McKenzie. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at LinkSquares, and I'm very excited to be accompanied by two very esteemed guests, and we're going to be delving into the topic of negotiation. I have Ashlyn Donahue, who is our Senior Legal Director here at LinkSquares, and Moshe Cohen, who is a bit of a negotiation savant, author, trainer, and I've had the privilege of working with Moshe 3 times now across 3 different companies. But I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and tell the audience a little bit about your background.
My name is Ashlyn Donahue. I'm the Senior Director of Legal here at LinkSquares, and I've been negotiating primarily starting with sales contracts, but really all commercial agreements at 3 separate companies for over a decade now. And so I've really learned a lot of tips and tricks along the way on how to get to the resolution you're aiming for or as close as possible.
And hi, my name is Moshe Cohen, and I teach negotiation in companies all over the world, as well as at Boston University in the business school. And I've been doing it for about 30 years now. In addition to negotiation, I also teach mediation and leadership and communication, conflict resolution, which are all very closely linked to each other. And in fact, you can say that negotiation encompasses all of those subjects.
Awesome. So why don't we start at the top? Question to both of you. What is negotiation, and how would you define a successful negotiation?
Like to start?
So in the most general sense, negotiations happen when people need to meet their needs together with other people who have different needs. And negotiation is the process of finding solutions that satisfy both people's needs in a way that both people can live with. In some cases, that means that their needs will clash, and therefore they have to find solutions where each is trying to grab more value for themselves. In other cases, the challenge is to find overlap in their needs so that each can do well while also helping the other one do well in the process.
Not much I would add there.
Okay, perfect. All right. What do we think is the biggest misconception with negotiation?
I think the biggest misconception that I've seen is that it's an adversarial activity and that you're stepping into something where you need to be on the defensive and really, taking it with more of a angered or heightened approach. And I don't view it that way. I think this is something that is a very strategic activity that you need to embark on, and that it really needs to be friendly, and you need to think about this as aiming to get to a place that both parties are comfortable with and are partnering on a long path forward.
Got it. So, Moshe, anything misconceptions you see?
Definitely, and first of all, I agree with Ashlyn. It's very often seen as about winning, and it's not about that. But the other thing is, I think the biggest misconception about negotiation is that it's a thing. And it's not. Negotiation is really conversation. We negotiate all day, every day. In fact, anytime you and someone else need to make a decision and you don't start off in the same place, you have a negotiation. So everybody negotiates all day, every day. And I have people that come to me very often and say, oh, I don't negotiate. Or I don't know what I'm doing because I don't negotiate. And I'm like, no, actually, you negotiate all the time. You negotiate at home, you negotiate at work, you negotiate with your friends. So it's really just a conversation with a purpose, where the purpose is to meet your needs together with somebody else.
Yeah, totally. Are there any, often you see common sticking points when you're going through a negotiation?
I see lots of sticking points. And I'd be very curious to hear, more specifically in the realm of the contract negotiations that you're involved with, what are some of the sticking points you see?
Yeah, I think, one of the areas that folks often get wrapped around the axe on is they have a desire for something to be added to the agreement that is operationally very challenging from a business perspective. And getting over that hurdle, I think, is a lot harder than some of the things that are typically those heavy hitting legal negotiation areas like limitation of liability. Usually those are much easier to come to resolution. So when you're asking someone to change their way they're operating, their business practices, that can be the most difficult to overcome.
Yeah. And do you differentiate between legal risk and commercial risk?
I think they're very intertwined. I definitely view them as different things that you have to consider, but they often weave together. And so you have to really think about risk in the collective and really what is the overall risk that I have with this agreement or this relationship as we're moving forward. What could be a legal risk in one area for one agreement, one contract might not be something you need to think about at all in another. And so you really have to have that business lens when you're reviewing things and looking at that deal negotiation to understand what is the actual legal risk here. But it all stems through that commercial lens.
Got it. Yeah, I think Moshe, I liked your point. Like we negotiate all day, every day, right, as part of our lives. But negotiation, you need to have some position of power, some sort of leverage. Do you see any patterns where people lose leverage a lot in negotiations and things that give them that loss of leverage?
Yeah, so there's lots of ways to lose leverage in a negotiation. Sometimes it's by revealing information that hurts your cause or that inadvertently helps the other person's cause. Very often, the way we lose leverage is by losing sight of our alternatives and feeling like we have to come to an agreement, and therefore rushing into a deal. And one of the things that gives you power in negotiation is having more time than the other person or needing the deal less than they do. And very often we get ourselves into a mindset where we feel like we have to have this deal and we feel like we have to have it immediately. And therefore we give away a lot of the leverage that we could have if we just remembered that it's okay. If we don't get this deal or we don't get it right away, we'll still be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the time crunch is when things start to give things away. Inevitably, negotiations hit a wall. Sometimes we can't agree on things. Any sort of tips and tricks for folks when they feel like they're at loggerheads and they've hit a bit of a dead end?
I'd say for me, really, I go into this mindset where I need to seek to understand. Because often when you're at that point in the negotiation where you're just not seeing eye to eye and you're really struggling to get over that hurdle, it's really about starting to understand what is it they really care about on the other side. I go into questioning mode. I start asking questions, trying to dig deeper, understand the why, because I think that allows you to get more creative with the solution versus I have, position A that I want, you have position B, like they're not the same. There's no path forward. There's always a path forward if you can really look behind the curtain at what are they trying to get at, and then, solution around that.
How much does ego play an impact?
I mean, depends on who you're dealing with. I think that ego is a subset of emotion, and the emotions have a huge impact in negotiation. Sometimes it's going to be ego, sometimes it's going to be fear, sometimes it's going to be somebody getting excited about an opportunity. So ego can play a huge role, but to me, I see it as a subset of a much bigger emotional question, how that plays into negotiation.
Yeah, totally. And Moshe, you're in an academic environment, right? You're a lecturer at a very prestigious university college over here. I use the right nomenclature. Is there any more recent research that you found that is relevant in today's business environment?
There's some things going on now with negotiating with AI. And a lot of that actually has to do more with how do we teach people to negotiate, because we're trying to create exercises using AI to help people negotiate in various scenarios and against various personalities. But no, the theory of negotiation develops kind of slowly because we're dealing with people and people haven't changed that much in the last 200 years. So no, there aren't that many new revelations in the field from a research point of view that really strike me.
Right. And you specialize in emotional management, right? In terms of negotiation. Are there any sort of psychological tips or tricks? I'm sure you've got a whole plethora of them that might be little nuggets to help people.
So I'll give you two right off the bat. So you want to sort of separate short term and long term. One of the things that happens is that negotiations tend to overwhelm us emotionally in the moment. So we have moments where we get excited, we get angry, we get frustrated, we become overwhelmed. And the problem is whenever that happens, it becomes very difficult for us to access our skills and remember our strategies. So in order to manage moments, one of the things we need to learn to do is to slow down. So a lot of what I work with my students on, for example, is becoming more aware of those moments where you are emotionally agitated or overwhelmed, and then to use various techniques to slow yourself down. It could be something as simple as staying silent. It could be something as simple as asking a question, let the other person talk. It could be something as simple as calling for a break and coming back. So learning to slow down in those stressful moments. And the other, and this is a more long-term effect, is being much more mindful of the narrative you have in your mind as you negotiate. You see, in life, there's what happens to you, and then there's your story about what happens to you. And our actions are very often driven more by the stories we tell ourselves than by what actually happened. So if you walk into negotiation saying, well, we're negotiating against this huge company, we don't have a chance, well, then you've just psyched yourself out of that negotiation. And the only thing that's driving that is your narrative about your relative position to that other company. So being mindful and learning to manage your narratives is essential in managing your emotions in a longer term sense.
Good advice.
It's okay.
go for it, yeah.
I love that piece about slowing down, and that is something that I'm constantly talking to the people on my team, but also trying to relay to the business teams that I'm working with as well. Sometimes we have to slow down to speed up. In tech in particular, there is a sense of urgency, and we want to close deals fast, and sometimes fast does not show up the way you think it means. You need to really slow down, take a beat, get to where you want to go next before you can really progress that deal and hopefully close it quicker.
Yeah, in my class at BU, they do lots of simulated negotiations where they negotiate with each other. And invariably, the teams that finish first don't do the best.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Ashlyn, you know this too well when you're dealing with sales teams trying to hit a quota at the end of the month, end of a quarter. Everything's got to be done yesterday, right? So a lot of rush. So said no one ever, negotiation was too fast, right? From your perspective, what are the main causes of delays?
I think the main causes of delays are really having a multitude of approvals or folks that need to provide input internally within your own organization and not really understanding who that person is or how to get to them in the moment when you need them. So really unblocking that approval matrix within your organization will help you move faster. I think the second is not really understanding your counterparty's process and making assumptions and operating based on those assumptions. And when you do that, I think it puts you in a position sometimes where things get slowed down because you maybe try to move too quickly and you're not working within the parameters that they have. You don't meet their expectations and they get frustrated and then they slow down.
Yeah. Any tools or processes that can help?
I think, on the sales side, particularly, any contract lifecycle management platform that you have is going to really help you within your internal organization centralize where you're managing that internal deal negotiation process, because it is, as Moshe said, everything's a negotiation, and even internally that's the case when you're trying to operate and sell or buy from another organization. It also helps you build out workflows so you can unstick those moments where everyone's kind of pointing at, I think it's that person, it might be me, I'm not really sure, and really understand who's that approver that you need to work with and automate all of that. So I do think there's a lot of opportunity through systemization to centralize and improve your velocity.
I think you might have answered this question already with that answer, but I'll ask it again slightly differently. Do you think better data and past contracts helps improve with the future negotiations?
Absolutely. Even, forget about understanding across organizations. One of the first things I do when I ever intake a contract is really understand, do we have an existing relationship with this third party? Are they a vendor of ours? Are they a customer of ours? I might look at the old agreement. I might try to understand how we've worked with them in the past or are currently working with them. And that might inform some of the decisions that I'm going to make or, the strategy that I'm going to put behind that negotiation.
So in the old world order where no such thing as a CLM existed, how would you do that?
I would ask the business team, do we work with them? Do you know if they're a customer? I might have to ask more than one person to really get to that data set.
Got it. So a good system with good process on top of that gives you much more efficiency.
Absolutely.
Got it. And I guess I think you've answered this question as well, but going into the day-to-day operations of doing what you do without historical context, what sort of risk does that put on the business?
I'm not sure that I would say it puts risk on the business per se, but it definitely has the ability to slow things down. Not in the good way where we're going to slow down to speed up from a negotiation perspective, but in the bad way where really you might not understand the full scope of the relationship. You might ask for things that, just really don't have that lens, and it can put you in a worse position from a negotiating standpoint and frustrate them, which, again, I feel like that is, the the fastest way to really slow your deal down.
Got it.
I'm wondering if I can add to that because
Please.
I think that, I work with legal departments and sales teams all the time. And what I keep hearing from legal is I wish sales had brought us in sooner. And having a way of sharing information about what is going to come up in the legal conversation for the salespeople to be aware of, maybe will help set up those negotiations better. So sales isn't coming at the last minute and feeling like, all right, we have to undo a whole bunch of stuff here, or we have to educate people, at the very last minute. The other thing that I've heard is that salespeople need better information about what to expect, so they don't structure deals that are going to be very hard to close from a legal point of view. And having information that's common and easily accessible by both sales and legal can overcome some of that and streamline the whole process to avoid some of those delays. Because one of the things that we say a lot in the negotiation field is that preparation is what negotiations live and die by. If you don't have good preparation, you're way behind because you've got to spend all that time learning what you need to know on the fly. And having a common source of information like a CLM gives you a huge head start on that preparation.
Absolutely.
I think that it's very clear that negotiation is a human skill. There's massive sort of emotion tied to it, human dynamic, but technology is evolving very, very quickly. Are you seeing technology have more influence on in sort of the world in which you train, Moshe?
At the end of the day, it still comes down to people.
Yeah.
Now, will people very shortly have to negotiate against AI platforms? Probably. The human part of it is that it's still going to be people doing that. So at the very least, they have to learn how to manage their own emotions, right? The AI platform won't have emotions that we know of, but it will still impact our emotions as negotiators. And I'm not going to be surprised if very soon AI platforms will be able to key into our emotions and actually press our buttons purposely. So we need to become even more skilled at recognizing what's going on with ourselves and managing our emotions as we negotiate with these AI platforms. So far, I haven't seen a huge impact of that, but you can see it near it's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. What are you saying, Ashley?
I'm seeing AI is definitely starting to be used as a negotiation tool in your toolkit, whether that's from suggesting red lines on the pre-signature side of a contract or really helping to formulate commentary back to the other side on your positioning. I think what's interesting is that there have definitely been some scenarios where folks are using AI to come up with what it is they care about redlining and negotiating, and maybe they don't have the AI. To clarify, the AI doesn't have the full business context and lens through which to consider what we're trying to accomplish here. And it's creating some unnecessary friction because it's maybe adding more red lines than one would typically expect for that type of relationship, or adding in things without taking into consideration like what the risk is and what the business, goals are. And you have to really unwind that. And once it's in the contract as a red line, I find it's harder for the other party to walk away from because it's something you've asked for, something driven by AI, but at the end of the day, you asked for it.
Yeah, totally. Once it's in there, they have to take ownership of it. God forbid we're going to have two AIs negotiating against one another. Hope that day is a long way off. Cool. Actually, I've heard you say this a lot of times. You like to see legal teams as business propellers moving businesses forward. I know you work a lot closely with my organization, the sales organization. What can sales teams do better to position their contracts to help you?
I think that one of the things that I've seen sales organization and our team here do really well is seek to understand what are some things where they know we may have some flexibility and some things that they know we don't, and to really get ahead of that at the beginning of the life cycle. Most sales organizations, for example, don't accept termination for convenience as something they'll agree to in their contracts. And positioning sales with talk tracks around that, making sure they understand some of those things that are more challenging for your organization to agree to, helps them start to get to a place where we're not having to walk back those things the customer's asking. We've set the expectation up front, and I do think that really helps.
Got it. Moshe, any advice for sales teams on how to negotiate and give legal teams some help when they get into that?
Well, I think fundamentally think of legal teams as your partners in the negotiation, not as someone who is in the way of you closing a deal. I think it's a mindset issue, first of all. The second thing is be curious. I really loved what you said before about approaching negotiations with curiosity. So be curious about what are some of the things that I might need to think about. What are some of the things that I might need to give legal a heads up on? And to just try to be as knowledgeable as possible as they can about the full aspects of the deal. I think it's very easy in sales to think, okay, once I've come to a price agreement with the client on price and scope, the deal is done. But the deal isn't done, right? And to recognize that the deal isn't done until the contract is completed, and that the contract includes way more just than the price and scope. Just to have that in your mind helps you negotiate better deals and prevents you from negotiating away things in the deal negotiation that then you might have been able to use in your contract negotiation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of education there, right? So people know what are the points that you're not prepared to or you cannot negotiate on, and draw a hard line on that before you having to say it. I think that's very helpful. I think a close collaborative working relationship. I think we're very lucky here in our organization that our sales teams and your organization work very closely together. So education, I think, is key, right? So you're supporting one another. All right, let's sort of scratch that AI thing a little bit more. So looking ahead, let's kind of look into the future. How do you think you see AI automation changing the role of the human negotiator? We touched on this a little bit, but let's go a little deeper. And do we think that negotiation will become faster and more standardized, or will the complexity keep it very, very human? What do you think?
I'm not good at predicting the future, but I'll tell you what I think. All right. Which is, initially, I think we're going to see some of the more routine negotiations automated and relegated to AI. There are sort of standard agreements that vary relatively little from deal to deal. Those are probably going to be the first that get automated. The more complex deals, the ones that are more make or break for the organization, I think it's gonna be a while till we see those done. But that's just my guess.
I would say I think we're already starting to see, even before kind of full automation, a lens through which you can create more self-service opportunities for your business teams through the use of AI, where you can empower them to use AI as a way to determine, like, do I actually need legal input on this contract, yes or no? And then I think it will progress in the way that Moshe has suggested over here. But I'm not sure how far out we are on full AI to AI negotiation. But I do think there's going to have to be some aspect of a relationship, a human relationship behind some of it. And that's going to drive the decisions that the AI will make when we're talking strictly about drafting.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think at the end of the day, there are intangible factors that are going to be very hard to incorporate into the AI.
Yeah.
Right. I think of it, for example, for my GPS. It can calculate which way is faster, but it has a hard time calculating which way is slightly less annoying. Right? Yeah. Okay, yeah, this way requires me to turn left across traffic twice, and that really irritates me, causes my stress to go up. It's not incorporated into the algorithm and it's very hard for them to know because different people get stressed by different things. So there are going to be human factors that I think are going to be harder to incorporate into that AI.
Moshe, have you started thinking about, like, as we move forward, any recommendations about how you think about training and enabling folks when we know that they're increasingly going to start going up against an emotionless machine? Has that come into your mindset yet?
Not that much. I mean, I think it falls back to what I said before, which is, it doesn't matter who you're negotiating with. It could be a skilled human. It could be a skilled machine. You need to be self-aware about the impact on you. How are you responding to that? If the machines are trained to press our buttons, can you recognize that your buttons have been pressed? Can you then stop and not get reactive and not do that thing that you were going to do when your buttons get pressed? So to become even more self-aware, because I think the machines are going to be exceptionally good at identifying how to push us into realms where we get reactive and make mistakes. And that means we have to be extra on the ball
Yeah.
to be able to counter that.
Cool. Ashton, I want to come back to you on like tools and processes. You know, you obviously use technology to enable yourself to be more efficient. What advice would you give to folks like you who are evaluating tools, technologies, and processes to help be more effective in the negotiation process, specifically around the CLM type technology stack?
I think you really need to start with what are those business outcomes you're driving for, and then back into kind of what system and solution is going to best meet your needs. I think folks get really feature excited, and they really start to look at like, oh, I want this tool, and I want this, and I want that. But are you really going to ever use them? And so I think really, again, leaning back into why do I want this tool? What is the business outcome I want from it? And then mapping back into, okay, what do I actually need a tool to deliver on? Really helps you pick something that's going to best meet your needs and provide you with a path forward.
Got it. Perfect. All right, we've come to the end, so we're about to wrap. I'm going to ask you two final questions, and let's get your thoughts on this. So, Moshe, one sentence. What's your golden rule of negotiation? And then the same question to you, Ashley.
So when people ask me, what's the key to negotiation? I say, prepare, slow down, and listen.
Perfect. Good advice.
I love that advice. The thing that I often tell folks is you have to stand for something or you're going to just fall for everything. And what I mean by that is they often get on and they start just giving away, oh yeah, I'll give you that, I'll give you that. You do that, you've already lost. It's really hard to overcome.
Got it. And similar question, but slightly different. Last question. What's one negotiation mistake you see repeatedly that people should avoid at all costs?
Talking. I think that people get nervous and they start babbling and they start talking and giving away information and making concessions. And before they've realized it, they've talked themselves into a bad deal.
I've seen that far too many times. The power of the pregnant pause. Ashlyn?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. What's one negotiation mistake you see repeatedly that people should avoid at all costs?
Yeah, I mean, I just have to double down on that one. That's the one where you just give away the farm before you even get started.
Yeah, I agree. I just see people negotiating against themselves all the time. You say, what are you doing?
All right, Steve, what about you?
Yeah, I think we've spoken about it. I think you've both hinted at it. I think slowing down to speed up is absolutely crucial, being thoughtful, not allowing your emotions to run away with you, and slowing down and calming down. Otherwise, you let someone else dictate the pace, and that's when you make mistakes.
Awesome. And what is one negotiation mistake that you repeatedly see?
I think I said it a little bit earlier, but I'll say it again. I see, certainly in the sales realm, people saying, I will give you things before they ask for anything. And before you know it, you might have, often there's a bunch of things that you have at your disposal to give as part of a negotiation. And if you have 10 of them, say, for example, and you give 8 of them away before someone's even asked, you're only left with 2. And I just see that as so common, where people are giving away too freely and too liberally, and then you've got nothing left to negotiate with. Ashton and Moshe, thank you so much. This has been super insightful and really appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.